The morning sun shimmered softly over downtown Seattle as Claire Anderson parallel parked her silver sedan a block away from Hamilton and Pierce Fine Jewelry. The cool April breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee and rain-washed sidewalks as Claire stepped out, adjusting the sleeves of her beige sweater. She wore simple navy slacks and practical flats, no flashy handbag, no visible jewelry, no signs of wealth. And yet, behind her calm and unassuming appearance stood a woman who had built a billion-dollar tech company from scratch. At 34, Claire was one of the most respected names in sustainable energy. Her company, Green Future Technologies, had gone public just 3 years earlier, earning headlines in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. But you wouldn't guess any of that from looking at her. Claire had always preferred substance over style. Even with millions in the bank, she still grocery shopped on weekends, drove herself around town, and wore her natural curls pulled back in a neat bun. "Keep it real," her mother used to say. And Claire had listened. Today wasn't about business. Today was about family. In exactly 1 month, her parents, Charles and Evelyn Anderson, would celebrate 40 years of marriage. Claire smiled to herself as she walked toward the storefront, remembering how her mother had once pawned her engagement ring to help fund Claire's first product prototype. "I believe in you," her mother had said with tears in her eyes. That moment had never left Claire's heart. Now it was time to repay that faith, not with words, but with something tangible. Something beautiful. Hamilton and Pierce had stood on the corner of Fifth Avenue in Maine for over 60 years. It was where Seattle's elite came to shop for engagement rings, anniversary gifts, and heirlooms that would be passed down through generations. Claire had researched dozens of high-end jewelers, but this place had the kind of timeless elegance her mother would adore: dark mahogany floors, brass-framed glass cases, and a hushed reverence that felt more like a museum than a store. Still, as she reached for the heavy glass door, Claire hesitated. Despite her status, places like this still carried an unspoken challenge. Would they see her, or just the sweater? She straightened her shoulders and stepped inside. A soft chime announced her arrival. The lighting was warm, ambient, and luxurious. Diamonds sparkled like stars in velvet-lined cases. A few sharply dressed associates glanced her way, and then quickly looked elsewhere. Claire didn't flinch. She walked slowly toward a display of elegant diamond necklaces, her eyes catching one with a 3-carat oval centerpiece. This, she thought, would bring Mom to tears. She waited for someone to help her. But no one came. Not yet. Claire stood quietly at the glass case, admiring the elegant necklace glistening beneath the soft lights. A 3-carat oval diamond, perfectly set in a halo of smaller stones, lay on a slender platinum chain. It was classic, refined, exactly the kind of piece her mother would treasure. She waited. And waited. Across the room, 2 sales associates greeted a couple that had just walked in. The woman wore a fur-lined coat despite the mild spring weather, her fingers stacked with rings, each glittering with conspicuous intent. The man beside her sported an expensive watch that screamed old money. One associate, a tall man with silvery hair and a too-perfect smile, his name tag read Victor, nearly fell over himself in greeting. "Mrs. Carmichael, what a delight to see you again," he gushed. "Is this the lucky gentleman you mentioned last week?" Claire offered a polite smile in their direction, then returned her gaze to the necklace. Still no one came. A young associate, her name tag read Jessica, began to approach Claire, but the gray-suited manager near the counter gently redirected her. "Jessica, please assist Mrs. Livingston in the Sapphire Room," he said in a tone that seemed friendly but firm. Jessica glanced back at Claire with hesitation before disappearing behind a velvet curtain. Claire sighed silently and moved on to the next case, this one featuring fine timepieces. A matching watch set might be a wonderful way to celebrate both of her parents, something elegant for her mother and something dignified for her father. Her dad, a retired high school principal, had worn the same watch for over 20 years. It had sentimental value, sure, but a little upgrade wouldn't hurt. From a few feet away, she overheard low voices. "Who's helping the woman in the beige sweater?" the manager asked in a clipped whisper. "I don't think anyone is," Victor replied, casting a quick glance her way. "She's probably just browsing. Not really our usual clientele." The manager, whose name she would later learn was Gerald Harrison, gave a short huff. "Keep an eye on her. Sometimes those browsers have sticky fingers. Focus on the Carmichaels, they're celebrating an anniversary, might be looking to spend big." Claire's stomach turned. She wasn't shocked. Sadly, this wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated or misjudged because of how she looked. She'd had investors question her legitimacy, reporters assume she was someone's assistant, and executives talk over her in meetings, until they saw her name on the IPO documents. Still, she never got used to it. A part of her wanted to walk out, to spend her millions somewhere else. But then another part, the one that had pitched her dream to skeptical men in expensive suits and fought for every dollar of seed funding, decided to stay. She stood up straighter. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady as Victor passed nearby. "I'd like some assistance, please." Victor glanced at her, smiled thinly. "One moment," he said, and then walked right past her. Just as the tension in Claire's shoulders began to rise, she heard a soft voice behind her, young, friendly, and sincere. "Hi there, I'm Jessica. I'm so sorry you've had to wait." Claire turned to see a fresh-faced associate with warm eyes and an honest expression. Jessica looked to be in her late 20s, her nameplate neatly pinned to her blazer, standing a few steps behind the counter, keys in hand. For the first time since entering the store, Claire felt seen, not as a suspect or an inconvenience, but as a person. "It's quite all right," Claire replied with a small smile. "I just appreciate someone finally taking the time." Jessica nodded, stepping forward. "What brings you in today?" Claire's voice softened. "I'm looking for something special for my mother. My parents are celebrating their 40th anniversary next month, and I want to give her a gift she'll never forget." Jessica's expression lit up. "That's wonderful. Do you have something specific in mind? A necklace, a ring, maybe a bracelet?" Claire pointed to the necklace she had been admiring earlier, a 3-carat oval-cut diamond surrounded by a delicate halo of smaller diamonds, all set in platinum. "I was drawn to that one. It reminds me of something she would have loved in her younger years." Jessica leaned over the glass and smiled. "Excellent choice. That's one of our finest pieces, timeless and elegant." But as she reached for the keys to unlock the case, an abrupt voice interrupted. "Jessica, may I have a word?" It was Gerald Harrison. Jessica hesitated but followed her manager a few paces away. Their conversation wasn't loud, but Claire, having been in too many boardrooms to miss a passive-aggressive tone, caught every word. "What do you think you're doing?" Harrison hissed. "She asked to see the necklace," Jessica said calmly. "We don't show high-value pieces to every browser who walks in off the street," he snapped. "Start with something from the entry-level collection." Jessica returned to Claire, her professional smile slightly tighter now. "I apologize for the delay. Perhaps we could begin with some of the newer pieces in this case. They're quite beautiful and more accessible." Claire's expression remained composed, but her voice was firm. "Jessica, I understand exactly what's going on here. and I know it's not your fault. But I'm specifically interested in the oval-cut diamond necklace. And I'd very much like to see it now. If that's a problem, I'm happy to take my business elsewhere." Jessica hesitated, glanced at the manager, who was now conveniently helping someone else, then took a deep breath. "It's not a problem at all," she said, reaching again for the display key. "Let me show you the piece you asked for." As Jessica unlocked the case and lifted the necklace onto a velvet tray, Claire leaned in. The diamond shimmered beneath the lights, throwing tiny rainbows across the polished surface. Jessica smiled. "This one's a showstopper." And for the first time that morning, Claire smiled back. "So are you." Jessica carefully placed the necklace on a velvet tray and invited Claire to take a closer look. The diamond sparkled like sunlight on fresh snow, its brilliance magnified by the smaller stones encircling it. Claire gently picked it up, letting the platinum chain slip through her fingers. "The craftsmanship is stunning," she said quietly, almost to herself. "My mother always loved pieces that spoke softly but carried a lasting impression." Jessica nodded. "This one does just that. It's a 3.2-carat oval-cut diamond, internally flawless. The platinum setting is accented by just under a carat of halo diamonds. It's one of our premium selections." Before Claire could respond, Gerald Harrison reappeared, his voice oozing with forced cheer. "How are we doing over here?" he asked, his eyes flickering to the necklace now resting in Claire's hands. "Just fine," Claire replied, keeping her tone even. "Jessica has been incredibly helpful." Gerald's gaze lingered on the tray, then shifted to Claire. "That particular piece is from our signature collection. It starts at $175,000. Claire raised an eyebrow, her voice calm. "Is that meant to inform me, or deter me?" He hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Not at all. Of course, if you're looking for something with even more presence, we could show you the Marshall collection. Those pieces begin at $250,000. Claire smiled politely. "I didn't mention any budget constraints, Mr. Harrison." Gerald blinked. Jessica stepped in smoothly. "We have a private viewing room available. If you'd like, I can show you selections from the Marshall collection in a more comfortable setting." "That would be perfect," Claire said, her voice kind but direct. As Jessica led her toward the back of the store, Gerald leaned in and whispered to the young associate, "Be careful. The Marshall pieces aren't for window shoppers." Jessica's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The private viewing room was elegantly appointed with soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and a glass display counter framed in cherry wood. A chilled bottle of water arrived moments later, served on a silver tray. Claire took a seat and made a quick call. "David, it's Claire. Can you bring the portfolio and meet me at Hamilton and Pierce in 20 minutes? "Yes, the one downtown." "Thank you." Jessica returned with a polished mahogany case. "This is the Marshall collection," she said as she opened the lid, revealing a cascade of dazzling gems, necklaces, earrings, rings, each one more breathtaking than the last. Claire's eyes landed on a piece she couldn't ignore, a 5.7-carat pear-shaped diamond surrounded by a waterfall of smaller stones. "That's one of my favorites," a voice said from the doorway. Claire looked up. An elegant woman with silver hair entered the room. "I'm Eleanor Marshall. I designed that piece myself." Gerald called and mentioned a young woman wanted to see the collection. "I came to assess her seriousness." Claire stood and extended her hand. "Claire Anderson," she said. Marshall's expression shifted. "The Claire Anderson?" she asked, her tone now tinged with recognition. Claire nodded. And just like that, everything changed. The room fell into a beat of stunned silence after Claire introduced herself. Eleanor Marshall, designer and co-owner of Hamilton and Pierce, studied the woman before her with fresh eyes. The tailored sweater and quiet confidence made sense now. This wasn't just a polite young woman shopping for a gift, this was Claire Anderson, the pioneering tech entrepreneur who'd transformed the world of renewable energy storage. "My dear," Mrs. Marshall said with a warm smile, "it's truly an honor. My husband and I are investors in several green technology ventures. Your work has been nothing short of revolutionary." Claire gave a modest nod. "That's kind of you to say. It's been a long journey, but worth every challenge." Jessica stood by, clearly processing the exchange. Her eyes widened slightly, not with awe, but with understanding. The way Claire had carried herself, her patience, her calm, it all made sense now. She hadn't demanded attention. She had simply waited to be treated with basic human respect. Mrs. Marshall turned to Jessica. "Please inform Mr. Harrison that I will be personally assisting Ms. Anderson from this point forward." Claire gently interjected, "Jessica has been wonderful. I'd like her to stay involved, if that's all right." "Absolutely," Mrs. Marshall said, nodding approvingly. "That speaks volumes about your character, Ms. Anderson." Meanwhile, outside the private room, Jessica discreetly relayed the news to Mr. Harrison. The color visibly drained from his face. He looked toward the viewing room where Claire now sat comfortably with Seattle's most prominent jeweler and realized, too late, that his assumptions had nearly cost him everything. Within minutes, Mr. Harrison appeared at the doorway, now smiling with exaggerated warmth. "Ms. Anderson," he said, voice overly polished, "please accept my sincerest apologies for the earlier oversight. Had I known..." "That's the problem, isn't it?" Claire interrupted gently but firmly. "People shouldn't have to announce who they are in order to be treated with basic courtesy." Harrison opened his mouth, then thought better of it. At that moment, a tall man in a navy suit entered the store carrying a leather portfolio. He moved with the ease of someone accustomed to executive meetings and high-stakes negotiations. Spotting Claire, he walked directly to her. "David," perfect timing, Claire greeted him. "Mrs. Marshall, this is David Chen, my CFO." Introductions were made, and as David opened the portfolio, Claire pointed toward the Polaris suite, a breathtaking set featuring rare blue diamonds arranged like stars across a midnight sky. "I'd like to purchase this for my mother. And the necklace we viewed earlier, that will be for my sister's birthday." Mrs. Marshall smiled. "Those are two of our finest creations. Together, they total approximately $3.7 million. Claire nodded without hesitation. "Sounds perfect. David, please arrange the wire transfer." Jessica glanced at the stunned staff hovering just outside. It was no longer just a shopping trip. It was a lesson, one they would not soon forget. As David reviewed the paperwork with Mrs. Marshall and confirmed the transfer, Claire turned to Jessica, who had remained attentive and graceful through every step of the process. "While we're finalizing things," Claire said casually, "I'd like to take a look at your men's collection. My father would appreciate a watch to complement my mother's gift." Jessica's eyes lit up. "Of course. We have a selection of luxury timepieces from our Geneva collection. If you'll give me just a moment, I'll have it brought in." As she stepped out, Claire glanced around the elegant viewing room. She could see the subtle activity outside, staff whispering, trying to appear composed, even though their sideways glances gave away their surprise. She didn't blame them. Not entirely. But it was hard to ignore how different things would have been had she walked in wearing designer heels and a Chanel bag instead of sneakers and a sweater from a local boutique. Jessica returned moments later with a polished tray of watches, Among them was a platinum wristwatch with a smooth silver dial, sapphire crystal, and understated diamond hour markers. "This one is refined, but not flashy," Jessica offered. "It has a timeless quality, much like a 40-year marriage." Claire smiled. "That's the one." Jessica made a note and began preparing the item for packaging when Claire turned to her once more. "Jessica, is there anything else you think I might be overlooking? Something meaningful that ties into the anniversary theme?" Jessica paused thoughtfully. "Well, 40 years is traditionally represented by the ruby. We do have a pendant that features a teardrop ruby framed by diamonds. It's a customer favorite, simple, elegant, and deeply symbolic." Claire nodded. "Show me." When Jessica brought out the pendant, Claire took one look and said, "I'll take that too. For my mother's birthday later this year." David added the items to the transaction, which now totaled just over $4.2 million. Jessica carefully placed the purchases in velvet-lined boxes, the store logo embossed in gold on each lid. As the last signature was inked, Mr. Harrison approached again, his tone noticeably more deferential. "Ms. Anderson," he began, "please allow me to express." Claire held up her hand gently. "Actually, there is something you can do," she said, locking eyes with him. "Ensure that Jessica receives the full commission for this sale." Harrison's mouth opened, then closed again. "Of course," he finally said. "Absolutely." Claire turned to Jessica. "You treated me with kindness and professionalism when no one else did. That matters. And it shouldn't have taken a net worth to earn basic decency." Jessica's eyes shimmered with surprise and emotion. Outside the viewing room, the staff stood unusually still, their faces thoughtful. Claire didn't need to scold anyone. Her words, and her example, had done enough. For them, this wasn't just a sale. It was a moment of reckoning wrapped in a lesson of humility, respect, and grace. 1 week later, the front doors of Hamilton and Pierce swung open, and this time, the atmosphere inside shifted immediately. Mr. Harrison looked up from the main counter and nearly tripped over himself. "Ms. Anderson," he called out, his voice now brimming with eager hospitality. "Welcome back. May I offer you a seat in our premium client lounge? Something to drink, coffee, tea, perhaps some sparkling water?" Claire smiled politely. "That won't be necessary. I'm here to see Jessica." "Of course," Harrison said quickly, motioning to another associate. "Please let Jessica know that Ms. Anderson is here right away." Claire waited near the front this time, declining the flurry of offers for comfort or refreshment. She didn't need the velvet rope treatment. She just needed a few minutes of sincerity. Moments later, Jessica emerged from the back, her face brightening the moment she saw Claire. "Ms. Anderson. What a nice surprise. How are you?" "I'm doing well, thank you," Claire said warmly. "And please, just Claire." Jessica guided her to a quiet corner of the showroom, away from the bustling sales floor. "I wanted to thank you again," Claire began. "Not just for the help with the jewelry, but for how you treated me before you knew who I was." Jessica blushed slightly. "I just did what I hope anyone would do." Claire reached into her handbag and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. "I'd like you to take a look at this." Jessica accepted the envelope and carefully opened it. Inside was a letter on heavy stationery, embossed with a simple but elegant logo, the Claire Anderson Foundation. Her eyes scanned the content. Then she read it again, slower. It was an offer. A full-time position as a jewelry acquisitions specialist for Claire's charitable foundation, a role that involved curating fine jewelry collections for fundraising events supporting young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. The offer came with a generous salary, more than triple her current compensation, along with full benefits and flexible travel. Jessica blinked, speechless. "I started the foundation a few years ago," Claire explained. "We host galas, auctions, and donor events where unique jewelry is part of the experience. We need someone who knows the craft and, more importantly, treats people with care and integrity. That's hard to teach. But you already have it." Jessica looked up, eyes misting. "I don't know what to say." Claire smiled. "You don't have to say anything now. Think about it. My number's in the letter." From across the room, Mr. Harrison had clearly been watching. He quickly crossed the showroom, concern written all over his face. "Miss Anderson, I hope this isn't your way of poaching our staff?" Claire turned slowly, her tone calm but unmistakable. "Mr. Harrison," she said, "in life and in business, we all make choices. Sometimes those choices come with consequences, not immediately, but eventually." She turned back to Jessica. "I'm offering you an opportunity. Because you chose to treat me with respect when it mattered most. Let me know when you're ready for part 8, where the story concludes with a full circle." 2 weeks later, Jessica stood at the entrance of the Claire Anderson Foundation Seattle office, a modest but beautifully restored brick building not far from the waterfront. She had taken the leap, submitted her resignation at Hamilton and Pierce, packed her things, and embraced a future that felt as sparkling with promise as the jewels she used to sell. For Jessica, it wasn't just a better job. It was a fresh start. And for Claire, it was the final touch on something far more important than a business deal. It was about building a legacy rooted not in diamonds, but in dignity. Meanwhile, across town in a quiet suburb, Claire sat with her parents at their modest but lovingly maintained home. The backyard grill sizzled with her father's famous ribs, and the scent of sweet corn on the cob filled the air. Her mother, Evelyn, sat beneath the pergola, smiling with a quiet contentment that only came from decades of shared life and laughter. As the sun dipped low and golden light danced on the patio stones, Claire rose and walked over with a familiar velvet box in her hands. "Mom," she said softly, "I know you said not to do anything extravagant." Evelyn gave her daughter a knowing look. "Which usually means you already did." Claire chuckled, kneeling beside her. 40 years of love, sacrifice, and faith, especially the faith you had in me when no one else did. You pawned your engagement ring to help me chase a dream. You never asked for anything in return. But tonight, I'd like to give you a new memory." She opened the box. Inside lay the Polaris Suite, rare blue diamonds, set against a constellation of white stones, shimmering like a piece of the night sky itself. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Claire, this is too much." "No," Claire said gently, fastening the necklace around her mother's neck, "this is just enough." As Evelyn admired the necklace in the mirror Claire brought out, tears welled in her eyes. Not for the price tag, but for what it represented. Love returned. Gratitude remembered. A full circle moment. Later that night, Claire stepped out onto the porch, looking up at the real stars overhead. She thought about how quickly things could have turned out differently if she'd walked away from the jewelry store in frustration, if Jessica hadn't taken a risk by being kind, if assumptions had gone unchallenged. In the end, she didn't just buy jewelry. She sparked change. At Hamilton and Pierce, her story became legend. New employees were trained with her visit as a case study, not just about sales, but about character. And for Jessica, it was the beginning of a career built on respect and recognition, the kind of recognition that couldn't be measured in carrots or commissions, but in opportunity earned through kindness. Because in the end, Claire knew, appearances may shimmer, but it's how you treat people that truly shines. In a world that often rushes to judge people by how they look, what they wear, or how much they appear to have, Claire Anderson's story offers a timely and deeply human reminder: true worth cannot be measured in dollars, designer labels, or assumptions. This story isn't just about a wealthy woman being overlooked, it's about the quiet strength of dignity, the importance of treating others with respect regardless of status, and the life-changing power of kindness shown in simple moments. Jessica, the young associate who treated Claire with grace long before knowing who she was, reminds us that how we behave when no one's watching defines our character far more than when the spotlight is on us. For those of us in our later years, this story resonates even more. We've lived through times of change, seen society evolve, and understand that what endures isn't fame or fortune, it's the legacy we leave through our choices. How we raise our children, how we treat strangers, how we speak to the grocery clerk or the server at a diner, these small actions echo far beyond the moment. Claire repaid her mother's early sacrifice with a gift of beauty, but more than that, she honored her by living a life rooted in gratitude and grace. And in giving Jessica a chance, she proved that recognizing potential in others is one of the most meaningful gifts we can give. The lesson is simple, yet profound: kindness costs nothing but is worth everything. And no matter our age, it's never too late to be the reason someone else is seen, respected, and remembered.